Hello, friends. Okay, so today's show, I feel a little bit called out because we're going to be talking about rest. And if you know me, well, you know me. And I kind of needed this show. Maybe you do too. I hope it resonates with you all. Listen, I came across a statistic that stopped me in my tracks. Did you know that 72% of parents get insufficient sleep at least 3 nights a week? And when we finally make it to the end of the day and the kids are in bed and the dishes are done and that one last email is sent, do you know what 95% of us do? And I do it too. We stay up late scrolling or watching shows because it's the only time that we feel like is ours. Do you feel that way? Let me know in the comments. Like finally at the end of the day, you're like, okay, I can breathe. I can have a moment to myself. And this couldn't be more true for homeschooling families. And listen, if what I'm saying resonates with you at all, please know that I am absolutely in your camp right now. I am a working homeschool mom, which means my nights and weekends are when I actually get things done. So after I've given myself all day teaching, working, making content, managing the chaos, sometimes I just want to crawl into bed and watch my favorite show, which currently is that BBC show called The Midwife. Do you guys listen to that show? I love it so much. But I've been telling myself lately that that's actually progress because I stopped scrolling TikTok. Why? Because at least a show has an ending to it and I can have a boundary with myself. Because when I scroll on TikTok, man, I'll be up till 2 a.m. Enter the shame. But today's show, we're going to talk about what rest is. And I think that as an American society, we do confuse rest with escape, which is what a lot of us do at night. Because what if the things that we actually think are recharging us aren't doing that at all? What if they're contributing to our exhaustion? And I think most of us have really been taught that rest is kind of what numbs us out. But that's what we're going to talk about today because I think it's important. Are you in an exhausted state right now? I want to know. And this is not an area of expertise for me at all. Clearly not something that I have mastered. So I invited a qualified, amazing, brilliant guest on our show today. Dr. Joe is a functional neurologist and a father of 6 who actually gets what our lives look like. And I'm hoping he can help us understand what's happening in our bodies when we are tired and what real rest actually looks like. Because whatever we're doing right now, whatever I'm doing, I don't think it's working. I'm waking up tired. This is going to be a great show. Stick around. Hello, welcome to the show. I'm Christy-Faith, and I am so glad that Dr. Joe O'Toole is here with us today. He is a board-certified functional neurologist who specializes in brain integration and helping families understand what their bodies actually need to recover. But he's also a father of 6, a homeschool graduate himself, a homeschool dad, and the president of Homeschool Iowa. So if there's anybody who knows what busy means, it's him and his family. He knows what our homeschool lives actually look like. And it's been a pleasure because our paths have crossed with him and his wife, I think twice now at homeschool conferences. Scott and I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know them. And I said, you have to come on the show and we have to talk about rest. So Dr. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate you having me on. And just my background, I grew up in a family with 9 kids and my mom homeschooled all of us all the way through and just instilled a desire for learning and instilled a desire for curiosity. And that's really what has led a lot of my journey. And so now I'm here really just in the trenches and going through the same struggles of there's not enough time in the day to get everything done that I feel like needs to be done. And then even just here sitting on the podcast with you talking about rest and Sabbath and sleep and all this stuff, this week I feel like a hypocrite because this week is like I've had a year's worth of commitments all end up being in the same week. And so we're sitting here and it's and it can be very fatiguing to feel like a hypocrite even. And so that's where with it, like I'm there with everybody else and feeling the guilt that can come from feeling like a hypocrite, but it's not necessarily what you're doing, but what you change about your life that can help you change what you're doing to be able to grow into that.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, you guys, you see why I love him so much, that vulnerability. So, confession time. Yesterday, no, 2 days ago, I woke up at 4 to get work done before starting homeschooling. Yesterday, I woke up at 5 a.m. to film a podcast, ended up being an hour late to co op. And then, sure enough, co op rushing to games. I didn't even sit down and plop on the couch until like 9 p.m. And then woke up today, of course, 15 minutes late to film this particular podcast. So, ladies, if you think that like experts or whatever you want to call us, that we have it all together, we're not. I think this is a struggle just for everybody, and especially in American society. Um, I one of the emphases of my graduate program, I have a graduate degree in history, was just like the American psyche. And I think a lot of this has to do with culture, which we're going to talk about today. But first, Dr. Joe, let's define some terms, because I think we have a lot of confusion between rest. Those of us who are faith based, we also use the word Sabbath. It's a good word just for anybody, honestly. And then also, we're going to touch on a little bit of sleep as well. Would you just help us define maybe or redefine in our brains what rest actually is?
Yeah, so actually let me even take a step back from that and not just define what rest is, but actually define a little bit what's going on with the brain. And talk a little bit about the brain, because that's really where my passion is the brain, and how the brain interacts with our environment around us, and then how it creates this internal processing that we go through. So when we look at the brain, one of the biggest things that we need to see with the brain is that it's a highly metabolic organ. It's about 8% of our body weight, but about 20% of our metabolism all goes to our brain. So it's highly outpacing the rest of our body with its energy requirements. And so when we talk about sleep and rest and Sabbath, it's not just about our ability to unplug, but it's actually, when we look at the physiological mechanisms, it's our ability for our brain to calm down the metabolic demand. And so when we look at that, even when we're defining terms, we have to start with what is the brain's requirement for that. And so it's really, when we're defining what is rest, what is sleep, what is Sabbath, it's really our brain's ability to not have as much of a metabolic demand as what it has during our problem solving, our waking, our engagement. And so that's really kind of a background. So when we're talking about sleep specifically, just to define sleep a little bit, a lot of people think of sleep as a passive event where we're unconscious, we're unaware, and then nothing happens in our brain. Sleep is actually a highly active process. Sleep is not passive. When you talk about REM sleep, when you talk about dreaming, REM sleep really is a rapid eye movement is a hallmark of REM sleep. Dreaming is really highly active cortical visual cortex engagement. So you're actually visualizing something that is not coming through your eyes because your eyelids are shut. And so your brain is actually highly active when you're sleeping. You're just not getting that image through your eyes. What happens is, and I've actually have some cases that I'm working with right now called cataplexy. Cataplexy basically is when you sleep, your brain is supposed to paralyze a physical output. And so you don't get this movement, even though your brain is saying, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm engaging with this world around me, I'm actually paralyzed from responding to that. And cataplexy is where you don't get that paralysis mechanism, essentially. And so we've got all of this stuff. Now, there's some cool things with sleep that we're not going to maybe get into, touch on later. But again, understanding sleep is a highly active process where our brain is trying to essentially make sense of the world and to process information that we're not able to do with some of our conscious centers of the brain. So sleep, just keep in mind, sleep is a highly active process. It's not a passive process. Rest, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a passive process. Rest is where you're not engaged in problem solving. And so we think of one component we think of is multitasking. Okay, multitasking is I'm doing this, and as a parent, especially as a homeschool mom or homeschool dad, but as a homeschool parent, you are constantly multitasking, right? Well, technically, multitasking is not something our brain can do. It's called task switching. So we can task switch between things, and we can task switch some people faster and better than others. But the problem with task switching is it takes a lot more metabolism to be able to engage this attention switch. And so that's what we live most of our lives in, and it's constantly getting worse and worse and worse with the rise of technology and just different abilities to pull us into different thinking and problem solving and engagement and relationships and all that stuff. So all of that's going on. Rest is kind of the opposite of that, where I'm not constantly task switching. I'm actually passive, and think of more daydreaming. And again, getting just a little bit technical, you've got different networks in your brain. And if anybody's heard of the default mode network, that's kind of this network that's within your brain that is saying, I'm not engaged in problem solving. I'm not engaged in relationship solving, if you will. I'm just resting. I'm just daydreaming. And so that's really kind of the network that's really heavily involved when you're not task switching constantly, repetitively. And so that's kind of the difference between rest and sleep. Sleep is a much more active process. Rest is a much more passive process. So helping to define those terms a little bit, that might help make sense. And then Sabbath rest takes a little bit of a different connotation in that I would say from a scientific standpoint, that's less defined, if you will. But really, a Sabbath rest is a little bit more of both a prolonged passive state, a prolonged time in that not problem solving, but then also a time for relational connection. And an ability to plug in and oftentimes, and I'm sure everybody in the audience today can speak to this. When life gets busier, when problems start coming at you more and more and more, and attention gets divided, the relational aspect always suffers. And so then you start to speak different languages. You start to say the same thing but mean different things as spouses or as children. And so Sabbath rest almost takes more of a relational connotation, where I can spend time engaging and rebuilding this part of my life that is actually the most influential in how our body perceives and responds to stress. And so that's kind of how I would define the differences between the Sabbath rest, and sleep.
As a homeschool mom who values a family together approach and leans towards the classical and Charlotte Mason styles, I often struggle to bring my educational vision to life with my kids' diverse ages and learning needs. With all our interests and super packed schedule, bridging that gap between the dreamy homeschool I want and reality, I gotta be honest, it's a challenge. Now, yes, I know perfection isn't the goal, but if you're listening and you could use a little easing of your mental load in your day-to-day, I found a resource that has become the quiet hero of our routine, and it could be a really great option for you too. BJU Press Homeschool Curriculum. Now, many think that BJU Press Homeschool is solely an all-in-one option, and though it does excel in that role, did you know you can also opt for specific courses and tailor them to fit your family's needs, just as I have? BJU Press Homeschool provides the perfect balance of structure and flexibility and easily complements my family's mixed age, family together on the couch learning style. They are second to none in integrating a biblical worldview, stimulating critical thinking, and offering tons of hands-on activities in the lessons. To find out how BJU Press Homeschool can come alongside you in your homeschooling goals too, visit bjupresshomeschool.com or click the link in the show notes. Before we continue, I want to share with you a program that's been a game changer for our homeschool. At our center, we instructed and helped kids through pretty much every math program on the market and know firsthand just how important a solid math foundation is for our kids' futures. As a career educator with high standards, finding the right program that checked all the boxes felt like too tall of an order until one day I tried CTC Math. CTC Math is an online math curriculum for K-12 students with motivating, interactive lessons that allow kids to learn at their own pace. It does all the teaching and grading so you don't have to, and their adaptive lessons adjust so your child is progressing confidently. With CTC Math, your child is getting a top-notch education and you just made your homeschool life easier. Visit ctcmath.com to start your free trial today or click the link in the show notes. Wow. Okay. one, that's mind blowing. And the questions running through my mind are insane. Like, one thing that popped in my mind is I remember being so frustrated when I was going through infertility. So in my history, a lot of people know this about me. They know that I've had infertility, but they didn't know how many years. We had 7 full years of really, really sorrowful infertility. Yes, I have 4 kids now, but I'm also an older mom. So most of my friends and our friends who we got married with, their kids are grown already. So, but I remember being so frustrated when ladies would say, Christy, you just need rest. And I'm thinking to myself, tell my brain that. Tell my brain that, because, okay, so I'm sitting there. Sure, I'll pick up knitting. And what am I thinking about during the knitting, right? Or during doing a puzzle. And so can you help? I think that is a struggle, especially in today's society where parents carry such a heavy mental load. And more so than ever, and I even see a lot of it with the way the economy is now, just like even going to the grocery store, I think even financially, you're carrying a much heavier load than we used to. We're looking at every single price now, like even commodities, we have to look at those prices, things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what is this? Does this have to do with what the Bible says about capturing our thoughts? Like, is this something that we need to protect? Like, our minds just a million things, and then soccer, and then this, and then basketball practice, and then wait, where are we going to eat on the way, and this and that and the other. Can you talk about the brain a little bit with rest? Can the brain rest? And is this something to pursue? Because I know that's something that I struggle with, is even on a day off, even when I'm folding laundry, I'm thinking about a podcast episode idea, or I'm thinking about, right? Just everything, the schedule for the next week, or what I have to get ready for co-op,
Yeah. So I would say that probably fits more into the category of a Sabbath rest. And really what I would say to that is it really starts with an awareness that there's a need for it. And then secondary to that is then not necessarily understanding, but prioritizing that. And we've all seen, or most people have seen, the illustration where you take rocks and you put them into a jar, and then you put sand in on top of it, versus putting the sand in and then putting the rocks on top of that. Whatever you prioritize gets done. Right? So if we're not prioritizing rest, what we're doing, we're prioritizing taking care of my kids, taking care of my responsibilities, my commitments, all of this stuff, which is important. But if it truly is a high priority, then rest has to be prioritized, it has to be scheduled, and it has to be routine. And so that's where looking at, okay, I'm going to prioritize, and I'm going to block off time on my schedule to make sure that I do this. Now, with that, there's a couple things that happen from that, and I'll talk in just a second on how to make that priority happen, especially in a busy family and everything with that. But really, the reason why a Sabbath rest helps you versus a short-term 20-minute break where you rest is that you're constantly going to have these thoughts that come to you of, I've got to get this done, and this has to get scheduled, and that has to be done, and oh yeah, and we need to make a meal plan, and then oh yeah, we need to invite these people over, or whatever it is. The reason why it's helpful to have a Sabbath, a prolonged rest period, is those thoughts can come, but there's not pressure to perform. There's not the pressure that I have to do this now. So it can enter your mind, and you can say, oh, that's something I have to do, but I don't need to do now because I have time. And so that's why I think Sabbath rest is important, is that even when you have those moments, because when you live a busy life, those thoughts are going to come to you. You can't take captive and get rid of those thoughts. You can't truly just empty your mind, unless maybe you're a man. Sometimes that actually can't happen. And actually, I just saw some research on that. But other than that, like, thoughts are going to come unbidden to you. And so when it's saying take captive the thoughts, it's not saying don't let them happen. It's saying do the proper thing with them. And so in that case is, if I only have 20 minutes on my schedule, I've got my 20 minutes, I've got to shut my mind off during this time. Now your mind is not shutting off because you're concentrating on, I've got to shut my mind off. And so you're problem solving in that case. Versus if you have this prolonged block on your schedule where, all right, these things are coming, I'm folding laundry and I've got to do my meal plan, but I've got time to do that later. So there's not the pressure to perform. And so that's what I think taking captive those thoughts is in part saying from that standpoint.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, and I forget what book I read, someone will put it in the comments, I'm sure, when they see this, when this episode airs. There's a really famous book on Sabbath rest, and it was written by, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I think that I read the book, and I think that one of the aspects about being in the Jewish tradition with the Sabbath is that it is the rule. Like you're no one is forced to do anything, but if you want to be obedient, you do preserve the Sabbath. And he talks about in that book, and I remember, and I read it a couple of years ago, actually, so it's a little bit foggy. Forgive me. I'll put a link in the show notes maybe, but it's like when you have that expectation, you are almost forced to do it. Whereas today in American society, even if you're a Christian listening to this today, I even feel like Christian American culture, evangelical culture, still doesn't actually conceptualize Sabbath rest. And so, like as soon as you get home from church, the mom's making the ball game snacks and you're this and that, you're inviting people over and that type of a thing, which at least for me is not restful, having people over. But I think that there's something to like that biblical Sabbath rest where it was like a designated day where everyone else is doing it too. And that is the expectation that's kind of gone. And so, however people interpret that, I don't know. But what are your thoughts on that in terms of like the cultural expectation for it?
Yes. And so that's where I have two thoughts on that. One is we create our own culture. And so that's where in part what we allow and accept is going to spread both to our family and to the friends in our inner circle. And so I 100% agree with you that those in a church setting typically don't understand Sabbath rest very well at all. And so, but as we prioritize and push that out, then that creates a culture around us. So it's almost a microculture where then we can kind of enforce this societal pressure to say, no, I'm not doing anything on this day. And so that's one component that I think is important from a societal or cultural pressure, is that you can create that for yourself. The second is, so growing up, I grew up in a really small town in Iowa, and almost everything was shut down on Sundays. It was just kind of the given, like nothing was open. You could maybe go to the gas station and that would be open. And then my sister-in-law lived in the Cayman Islands for years, and that's a great place for Sabbath rest. I'll say that. Going and sitting on the beach is a great place to unwind and just shut down. But one of the things that I found very, very unique was when we went down to visit, it's a small community, essentially, right? You can't get away from it. You can't go drive somewhere. You're on this small island. And almost everything was shut down on Sundays. The businesses were shut down, restaurants were shut down, grocery stores were shut down. And there was this calming pace that took over when there's just this time in the entire society at large where everything just, the pace just goes from here to here. And so there's a tremendous value in having that societal influence. But again, you can impact the society around you, and you can impact the culture around you. So as a homeschool family, you're already countercultural, right? You're already pushing back in certain ways. So it's not going to be hard to then just add, okay, I'm a little weird already. Let's just be a little bit more weird and say, you know what, we're going to prioritize having a Sabbath rest. So one of the things that I found for myself personally, especially early on when I was first launching our clinic and building a business, and heavily involved in that, I was coaching high school football. We were helping plant a church. We were involved in so many things, having children, homeschooling. There's not time in your life to do everything that you need to do. And especially, and this is where even understanding what a Sabbath rest is, we can get very legalistic with that. But what I had to find is, okay, I'm helping plant a church, so Sundays actually are not a time for Sabbath rest. There's a lot of work that's going into it. If you're in full-time ministry as a pastor, let's say, your Sabbath rest is not on Saturday, right? You're heavily involved oftentimes. So I actually had to think a little bit more creatively, and I took time off from Wednesday at noon to Thursday at noon. And I created this Sabbath rest, again, a little bit non-traditional, but not getting to the legal aspects of what it looks like, but to the heart of what it looks like and what it's supposed to look like. And so making sure, okay, I am shut down from noon to noon, and I'm able to engage with my family. I'm able to engage. I'll go out and get coffee with somebody or do things like that. But I'm not engaging in problem solving and solving the world's problems and solving everybody's problems. And this is my time to protect and prioritize my own personal relationship with my creator, with my family, and with my friends. And so that's really what I would recommend is Sabbath rest is so vitally important that you need to make sure that you find the time for it. And it might not just be a Sunday thing.
That's so powerful. And that reminds me, when we first moved to Colorado, Scott flew back to Los Angeles every week. And I was solo. My parents hadn't moved out here yet. My sister hadn't moved out here. They're all here now and we're all together and it's really fun. But I was alone here in a new city and Scott left every week. And I had, wait for my ages of kids. Lincoln was 5, the twins were 2, and the baby was 7 months old when we moved here. And so it was like those first 2 years, right? But you know how I got through it? And honestly, Scott is, well, one, he's like my favorite person in the whole planet, but it's really hard to have like basically 3 babies, 2-year-old twins and a baby at the same time. And then it was Lincoln's first year of homeschooling because he was 5, like actual like kindergarten. And when Scott would fly back, you know what he would do? He would usually fly back on a Thursday evening, like sometimes in the middle of the night on Thursday, and then he would wrap his week up on Friday. But when I woke up on Saturday morning, nothing. He woke up with the kids. He fed the kids. Even if there were no groceries in the house, he didn't wake me up and ask me what's in the fridge. No, he went and ordered bagels. Like I literally did not have to think of any type of caregiving at all for the entire day of Saturday. And honestly, it got me through. Now, did I spend a portion of that like just focusing and ordering groceries online? I will admit, yes, I will. Yeah, but I had like the focus to do it. But I also like would read some books or I would call a friend or do something. I had no pressure for caregiving. And I think that was huge. And that absolutely was the Sabbath that he gave me during that time. And it recharged me for the week. And he then got on an airplane again. And we had to do that until we sold the company. But one thing that I think we need to have a heart to heart about is caregiving, because I think of those early years when I would try to get all 4 kids to church.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I sat down, I'm like done for the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've all been through that, trying to get the kids.
Yeah.
You don't enter with a spirit of rest when you're trying to get kids.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you're like, okay, sit down, let's start Sabbath or whatever,
right?
You know. And so I think that there may need to be, and I hope that there are some conversations between spouses regarding what it means to caregive and carry the mental load, because a lot of the ladies listening today are homeschooling moms, so they don't get that 8 hours during the weekday to, see the doctor, have a coffee with friend. And I'm always the first person to say, homeschooling is not the easiest choice. A lot of people call us privileged. No, we make a ton of sacrifice. Yes, we are privileged. We are privileged with the fact that we can make sacrifices in many ways, financially and all of that, to be able to do this and still survive and have our families be supported. So yes, in that sense, but we cannot blow past the fact just how many sacrifices it takes to be able to homeschool our kids. And it is not the easiest choice. It is the worthwhile choice. It's the same as I often compare it to having kids. Like there's those, people in their 20s. Oh, I don't want to have kids. They're too big. And then they have kids and they're like, how could I do it? It's hard, but it's so worth it. I think homeschooling is the same way. But can you speak a little bit to maybe speak to a dad listening right now, or a mom can have a dad listen to this podcast episode? Can you speak a little bit to, because I know you understand it. Your wife homeschools, your mom homeschooled you guys, about this mental load that we are all carrying every single day. And maybe a family can't do a full day like Scott was able to give me, but can you give your wife 5 hours? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So the generation that we are is different than my parents' generation, right? And there's different priorities that we place on things. But one thing so growing up in a family, 9 kids, all of us were homeschooled. My mom was a nurse by training. One of the sacrifices that she made, and if you know nurses, nursing is a calling and an identity. It is not just a job. Same thing with being a mom, quite frankly. Nurses make great moms oftentimes. I can speak personally to that. But so my mom made a sacrifice to pursue being mom over career. She made a sacrifice to spend hours a day with 9 kids, 8 boys, right? And I thank God and I thank my parents for the privilege of spending that time with my parents, and specifically with my mom. Now, my dad, in order to make that happen, you can imagine, so 8 out of the 9 kids, 8 of us were boys. So you can imagine, where none of us are real small, the amount of money it took just to feed us. So there were a lot of sacrifices that my dad worked 3 jobs. He worked a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs, but he structured his life in a way where even with the part-time jobs, he was able to involve us in that. So we were able to spend time with dad to an extent by going to work with him. And I was learning how to sweep the shop floors while he was working a blue collar job, even though his main job was a white collar job. And so he made those sacrifices, but he was able to then engage with us. And even within that, thinking creatively, he was able to take some of the load off my mom and be able to give her some time with that. Now, my mom is wired a little bit differently than a lot of people. Maybe it's just a generational thing, but like she actually was the type of woman that didn't need time away from her children and time away from caregiving. She was a Martha type of personality. And so she was actually fueled and fed by caring for her children. Even to this day, she can't sit down without caring for somebody. So you've got that type of person, but then there's a lot of people that they need that time. My wife is more of I need some time away. And so yeah, that's where it's, there are times similar to what I learned from my dad. I have the privilege. I will say this is a privilege, not a sacrifice, but it was also an intentional choice of career that I chose. And the way that my career has taken shape is I can involve my children in what I do. And so I'm able to bring them with me and be able to relieve some of the load from my wife. We're able to, again, we have the privilege of having family close by where there's family members that can step in and they can spend time with grandpa and grandma. So every Wednesday afternoon is grandma day, and all the kids go spend time with grandma, and it's the best day for for my mother-in-law. It's the best day for our children, and it's the best day for my wife. And so it just gives her that time. So I would say there's not one specific way to make it happen. It's every single family's situation and dynamics are different, but you need to think creatively and you need to get on the same page as a couple. And so that's a big piece. I think, kind of like you were saying, we need to sit down and have a heart to heart. Right. And in part, that's what a Sabbath rest allows is, okay, as husband and wife, we can send the kids out to the backyard to play, but we can now sit and have just a heart to heart, and deep conversations don't happen because I schedule something on my calendar and I have 30 minutes to talk. And we're going to get everything in these 30 minutes. Deep conversations happen when you don't have time pressure. And so that's part of it is if you can prioritize doing Sabbath rest, then you can actually sit down as a couple and say, we can have a deep conversation and start to let out some of the harder things that I don't want to present to you. And it might just be a little touchy conversation. So now we can have that deep conversation and be able to say, where are we not on the same page? How do we need to prioritize this? How do we, and so I think that's important. And that's where maybe it's you're at a spot where you're not having Sabbath rest and you just need to figure out how to make that happen, you might need to plan a date night and say, we're somebody's going to watch the kids for 6 hours or 5 hours or whatever. And we're going to go not just figure out like, what do we need to do to problem solve, but like, we're going to go on a date night just to make sure that like, we're going to have a topic of conversation on, we need to make sure that we prioritize time and time to be together as a family, time to rest and really kind of explore that Sabbath conversation.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people don't value their time and their attention as the value that it is. And we were just having this conversation last night with my son in terms of he's now entering high school basketball. There's a lot of demands. And we asked him to start praying about and thinking about the commitment that is required to play varsity ball. And if that's what you really want, we will go to the ends of the earth, dude, to make that happen. We want that for you. But we also want you to not just fall into it because you need to make decisions about your time. And you need to think about what you want for your future. And do we need to incorporate those? And could that mean changing how we do basketball? We would never take basketball, but we could absolutely change how we do basketball, right? And so, because the school that he's at, the level of intensity is a level that I'm not comfortable with. But of course, if you can read into that as far as you want, ladies listening. But hey, listen. So as I'm thinking about my own life, and I'm thinking about, man, okay, Sabbath rest, like just taking a break, just being, right? And I love it and one of the things I love about you, we talked about this at the last conference that we were at, is we both love when science confirms the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
right?
God told us to do it, and here's why. And I love doing that with parenting too. It's like there's 70 years of research to support what the Bible's been saying all along. But I want to talk about, like, I'm thinking about practical ways just for my own life right now. Here, let's have a brainstorm sesh for Christy's hot mess life. But I'm thinking, like, for me, I would, like, if I want a Sunday Sabbath rest, right? There's certain things that I would need to have accomplished on Saturday.
Yes.
So that my mind could rest. And I love that I often, when I teach my Homeschool 101 class at conferences, I love teaching the Homeschool 101. You put the jar up, that analogy, on the stones, right? Because they're like, how do I get everything done? And I'm like, you don't. You prioritize stones, pebbles, sand. And then that type of a thing. But I think that that's one practical takeaway, at least for me, in terms of like a battle with Sabbath rest and giving my brain a break to calm down. And is maybe you need to have a couple of hours that your husband gives you, or something, or someone in your life gives you. I want to talk about single parents and things like that too. But where, okay, give me 4 hours so I can get this, that, and the other done so that we can really enjoy tomorrow, right? That could be something. And what I mentioned earlier with Scott giving me that break, because the caregiving at that time with 3 kids in diapers, all of that was just so intense, like the physical labor of it. But you know what? Now my favorite way to do Sabbath is with my children. Whereas in that season, I needed a break from them. And so I think just holding loosely, whatever you need right now is not going to be what you need forever. We're all in different seasons. And I think that maybe a priority, at least for me, and maybe a mom listening, is me taking responsibility to get clarity on what exactly I need so that I can communicate that, because everyone wants a happy family and everyone knows that a happy mom
right.
is a more regulated family.
Yes.
But I see thoughts running through your mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you are 100% correct. So one thing my father-in-law has said for years, especially when we were in the early stages of having young kids and all of that stuff, it's getting a little bit easier now because we have our oldest is 13. And so now we can actually go out and go for a walk. We can go out for a couple hours because we have an at-home babysitter, which I'll come back to in just a second and make a point on that. But he would always say, especially those early years, is you're in the numb years. He's like, he would constantly repeat, you're in the numb years. You're not going to remember this time. Like, you're going to think back on it and have fond memories, but it's going to be very numb. It was a really good description of kind of those early years, but understanding there's different seasons in life, and especially with social media and our comparison culture, it's really easy to be like, oh, they're doing this and they're doing that, and you're not realizing the context of, oh, they're in a different season than I am, and so I will do that, but I'm not doing that now. And so being able to kind of structure your life around, this is what I need to do now and what I need to prioritize now, and then those priorities will change later. And so I think that's a very critical point to understand and make, is that the rocks that are in your jar, the big rocks right now, are not going to be the big rocks later. And so then structuring your life around that, I think, is really important. Coming back to having a babysitter in the house now, right? One of the things that I often struggled with, especially early on in my career and in just understanding life, growing up, understanding being an adult, all of that stuff. One of the things I struggled with is I am highly engaged in a lot of different areas in life, and with that comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of time commitment. And I was always struggling with this concept of, you can't create more time, right? Time is a valuable commodity, and you can't create time. And I try to be a creative problem solver. And so as I was pondering through that, I started to think, but what if you could create more time? Instead of just saying you can't, what if you say, but what if? And one of the things that kept coming back to me is that actually, no, you can create more time from the standpoint of, I can borrow other people's time. I can get other people to come into my life and to relieve some of this burden off of me. And so as a business owner, I'm able to hire employees to come in and provide their expertise, their experience, their knowledge, their wiring, their gifting, all of this. And what takes me an hour to do, they can do in 5 minutes. Or things like that. So I can actually literally create time that way, where I can get other people to take things off of me. And we commonly call that delegation, right? Now, how does that actually work in a family setting is, again, talking about this comparison culture is, my house needs to look just perfectly put together, and I need the decor to look like this, and I need the bathroom scrubbed, and I need to make the perfect little homemade meal, and I need all of this to look just the right way. And that comparison culture is such a heavy influence, especially at homeschool moms who are kind of more of considered a stay-at-home mom, where, all right, now that's your place. You need to make it look just right because you don't have any other responsibilities in life, right? And so you start thinking this way of this perfectionistic mindset that is being influenced on you. And so then you start to get overwhelmed because, well, I also have to change diapers, and I also have to do this. And it gets a lot more messy than what it looks like in somebody's reel. And so how do you make that happen? How do you create time for yourself as a stay-at-home mom, as a homeschool mom, as a homeschool dad? And really you start to look at borrowing other people's time. And a group of people whose time is not utilized efficiently or well at all are children, right?
I was hoping it was going here.
Right? Almost unlimited time, right? And oftentimes we get this disconnect. And the beauty of homeschooling is that education does not have to be separated into academics and left on that shelf, right? The beauty of homeschooling is education is living life and learning through life. And so, yes, academics is a component of that, but our philosophy with our children is we're inviting them into our life. We're not living their life. Right. Mm-hmm. And so yes, our son wants to play basketball and he loves it and he's pursuing that. So we will engage with him, but that's a part of our life as a family, not his life. And so that's where we're looking at it kind of from that angle. So then we can start to say, okay, you know what? The bathrooms need scrubbed, and mom does not have time to do that because she has other responsibilities. So guess who's going to do that? Not mom. And so then you create this expectation with children that they are involved in the family. And so you've got that. And I think a lot of people don't understand the value of putting your children to work. But my wife and I were exploring that about 6 months ago because a comment that my mother-in-law gave us. She does Grandma Day every week. She does Grandma Day, and she made this comment to us. She said, "Your children are very confident, and confident in a way that I don't see a lot of other children." And we're like, "Huh." That's odd because that's not actually been like a goal of ours, is to create confident children. I mean, it's kind of in the background, but we've never intentionally stated, I want confident children, right? We want good leaders. We want socially engaged children, and we want smart children. We want caring, but we've never said confident. And so we started exploring, why are our children confident? Why is that something that is like a unique trait that they have? And especially without being intentional to develop that. And one of the things that we kept coming back to was confidence comes from identity, right? And identity comes from, and actually, I think I might at some point be working with you on this, kind of building out that identity and talking about the neurology of identity at some point. But one of the things with that that's building confidence is having that identity. And identity comes from a need for me. A usefulness that I am contributing. I have something to give. And oftentimes we view children as this thing that we need to build, and not necessarily this being that has something to give and to contribute. And so if we see our children as a part of our family, and they've been created in a unique way, now they have something unique to contribute to the family. And that creates an identity, and that creates a confidence where now they can go out in the world, they can engage with grandma, they can engage with friends, they can engage with other adults, and they can say, I know who I am, because at home, I'm expected to scrub the toilets. At home, I am expected to watch my younger siblings so my parents can go for a walk because they need exercise and they need to connect. And so you create this unique culture. And that's why I am so convinced that homeschooling, if at all possible, is the best route that any family can go, because it naturally tends towards the ability to create that family culture and that need, instead of sending your kids to another organization where there's not necessarily a need for them to be there. When they're in the family, when they are part of that culture, now there's a need for me. And then that identity gets built, and then confidence gets built on that. Mm-hmm. So that's why, coming back to like, how do you create more time, and how do you, it's beyond just this, I can create more time, but it's literally, I am building my child's confidence and their identity by engaging them in taking things off of my plate.
Yeah. And I think a lot of parents feel guilty about it. We live in the suburbs of Colorado, and it is a highly sports oriented culture, very, very busy, tons of extracurriculars. And one thing I've noticed with the kids that are not homeschooled, just as a general rule in my particular microculture here, is they're not doing chores. They are being schlepped from adult-led activity to adult-led activity to adult-led activity. And then we are fed this lie that this is a good childhood. And let me tell you, it's really, really sad, the selfishness that I see, the lack of flexible thinking, when your life is wrapped up in like your sports performance, for example, or any other ballet performance, or just, in how busy you are, how many things you do. We almost consider it a flex in our society to say, oh, I'm just so busy, right? Everyone's busy. Just everyone's busy. Okay. So, but I think that, because it is a basic human need to be needed, to feel important, to feel valued. And so, it's interesting because in Thrive Homeschool Community, we talk about this in my I have an 8-step homeschool success framework, and we talk about balancing your home and things like that, and how valuable it is to incorporate a chore schedule literally into your school day, like into your schedule. And like we do the habit stacking stuff with, Atomic Habits, where when we eat, it's chores. And so it's chores 3 times a day. And honestly, now does my house always look perfect? No, we are living in it. I see books on there, but I will say that my house is not filthy. It's never filthy. Yes. It's just because it's kind of built in. And I love that, there are people that are financially strapped that, oh man, I would love to afford a housekeeper, or I would love to afford, this and that and the other. And I think that there are creative ways to get
Mhm.
that time back. Like, for example, when I was writing my book, I got on this meal plan thing where it was actually like a cost. People get on it for cost reasons. That wasn't my reason. I had to batch everything on Sundays. And it was this thing where you put all of the meats and the vegetables and all these, and then you put them in bags. Like, so like the meat's
Yep.
marinating and then you put it in the fridge and it's literally 5 dinners. I forget what the program was called. Anyway, but it actually ended up saving us money. And that wasn't the reason why we did it. It was because I was writing a book at the time. But
Yeah.
on Sundays, Scott and I, we just set aside time. The kids were expected to play independently. And Scott and I just did all the chopping and put it in. And, even like with the vegetables, you put in the salt and pepper and olive oil. It actually tasted better because when we ended up putting it in the oven, it was like marinated in salt. But,
Right.
but my point is that if you're a single mom listening right now, if you are going through a really, really hard time, if you are a working mom, maybe you're the breadwinner and you're trying to homeschool your kids right now, there are homeschooling community. Like, I know my twins are 11 now. Are you kidding? If they got invited over someone's house to be a mommy's helper, like, and I would say pay
Yeah.
them $2 and they'd think that's $1 million, right? Like,
Right.
we can utilize this beautiful community that we have. You can even turn it, even a high school girl, you can turn it into a certificate of some sort or an internship or whatever, right? And so one thing that I think is kind of an epiphany that I had is, moms listening, in terms of rest, like in getting time back, decide what you hate doing. Like, what do
Yeah.
you really, really hate doing? And then
Right.
figure out a way for someone else to do it. And one thing that I really hate, cleaning bathrooms.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I am very, very blessed that every other week we have a crew come and they clean my house from top to bottom. But let me tell you, Dr. Joe, I I do not clean
Right.
between their time.
Yep.
Like, it's a boundary I've set for myself. Like, I don't, even if my house doesn't look perfect, I just accept it. Right. Every
Yep.
once in a while, I'll wipe down if my kids have used my bathroom, and you know what happens when that happens is
Right.
splatter
You're
everywhere.
right. Because one thing you touch on is looking at things that you don't like to do. And actually in our clinic with our employees and our team, we've created these quadrants to be able to evaluate how do we get our team to be the most effective at what they do and bring who they are to the team. And so we've created these quadrants and we asked them to write out and I would highly encourage every homeschool parent to do this for themselves, is write out, what do I do? What am I doing that I enjoy doing? What am I doing that I don't enjoy doing? What am I doing that I'm good at? And what am I doing that I'm not good at? And looking, and then kind of using that to evaluate, okay, I don't want to get rid of these things that I enjoy doing. Like, if you enjoy spending time with your children, keep that on the list, right? You don't necessarily need to separate that and say, all right, I need somebody to come watch my children. Maybe you need to keep that on your list and say, I don't enjoy cleaning bathrooms, which who does, right? But then saying, okay, who can do that for me? And so maybe creating these quadrants for yourself to say, let's keep on my quadrant what I enjoy doing, and I can add more into that quadrant as I take these things off. So I think creating that framework is something that can help, again, shift your time so that you're creating more time.
Man, that is so powerful. And like, I was just thinking, because I haven't talked about it in this way, but I tell moms, even plan your homeschool this way. So,
Yes.
like, for example, I really do not enjoy, feel qualified in teaching math and science.
Mm-hmm.
And I also work full time, and I source them. I source those
Yep.
really well. Am I still a
Yep.
homeschooler? Yes. Am I still
Right.
holding my kids accountable? Yes. But am I actually teaching those actual lessons? No, I am not. Right.
Yes.
And in terms of getting time back, can I tell you, when I first started this, sourcing my homeschooling a little bit more smartly,
Mhm.
out of necessity, because Christy-Faith happened and I kind of, okay, overnight I have a job now. But I remember when Lincoln was on a class, I was like, I have 45 minutes right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness. So yeah, I think in terms of just really evaluating and sourcing smartly, I just absolutely love it. We've touched on so much today. There is one really important thing that I want to get to that I think will be really valuable, and we don't need to spend much time on it, but I don't want to leave without talking about it. Is binge watching shows, scrolling on social media, is that rest? Because we crave it. We need a break. Is that rest? Is that giving our brains what our brains need?
No. And the reason why is rest is not numbness. And scrolling, social media, binge watching, that creates a numbness and a disconnect. Rest is actually a deep connection.
Whoa! Okay. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's an escape. It's not an escape. You're escaping with those other things.
Correct. You're escaping reality. You're disconnecting, disassociating, and you're saying, I am out of my life. And the worst thing that you can do is to get out of your life. And if you feel the need for that, then you need to re-engineer your life. Okay. Now, there is the need for rest. There's not the need to disassociate from your life. So it, again, going back to those quadrants, like you might need to re-engineer what you're doing in life if you feel like I need to just completely separate myself from my life. But if you can say, okay, I need some rest, I need to go deep into who I am and set time to just be able to then just let your mind wander. And actually, I came across some really cool research that actually shows and it's based on the neurology, the best way to correct ADD, ADHD symptoms is by daydreaming. Which again seems paradoxical. It's like, wait a second, you're telling me that being this like distracted attention issue, the best thing to do that is to just like have free mind time. And it's really cool. And so actually some of the homework that I assign with some of my developmental kiddos, especially like ADD, ADHD, is I say, okay, mom, you need to, during your homeschool time, you actually need to schedule 10 minutes where you just force them to look out the window. And especially when you're starting to really feel the squirreliness happening, either send them outside to run around the house or just make them just stare out the window and get bored. And so that's where because what happens is the mind starts going and it starts exploring and it starts to get more creative and it starts to actually think instead of disconnecting and going numb and being told what to think. You're actually allowed to just let it wander and think. And so scrolling, binge watching, there is zero rest in that. The rest actually comes from being disconnected or disassociated, or not disassociated, but disconnected from problem solving and being able to just let your mind go deep into some not surface level problem solving, but like solving world hunger, like into some deep philosophical underpinnings, which as a 5-year-old kid are going to look a whole lot different than as a 45-year-old kid. So that's where looking at that is going to look different at different ages and things like that. But just there is a difference between scrolling and rest.
Okay, so then this begs the question, because I'm thinking, okay, so I have a really, really high stress tolerance and high frustration tolerance. A lot of other areas are messed up, but I can tolerate a lot. I can go and I can go and I can go and I can go. Why do I need rest? Why do we need this rest that you're talking about? Because I feel rested when I've gotten stuff done, which actually is not rest. That's a dopamine hit from,
Sure.
Yep. But anyway, but why convince me as the busy mom who's like doing a podcast every week and I'm homeschooling my kids and I'm going to conferences and all of this, who likes being busy. I enjoy it. I enjoy having things to think about. Right. And I enjoy thinking about ideas, which is what we're doing right now. We're thinking about rest. But for someone who doesn't see the payoff necessarily, they see more the payoff of getting it done rather than not getting something done. What would you say, like from brain science? We already know that if you're a Christian listening, the Bible tells us we need it. But from your expertise, as from the neurology aspect of it, why do humans need it?
That's a really good question, and that's a huge topic.
Right at the end.
I know, right? Trying without giving any background or without giving any rationale why, I would say the number one reason why you need rest is your brain will age significantly faster without rest, without proper sleep. Probably, I would say, other than physical activity, the number one modifying factor, and arguably it is the number one modifying factor for aging, for cognitive decline, for dementias, Alzheimer's, all of that. The number one modifiable risk factor is sleep and rest.
Okay, yeah. And then based on everything you said up until now, also, I think that rest is the type of rest that you are talking about, this true rest that involves connection and being present. It improves your quality of life.
Like 100%.
Yeah. Like that enough, right? I mean,
yes. In the short term, it will improve your quality of life. In the long term, it will both arguably extend, I guess, the quality of your life, but your actual ability to be like mentally there. Yeah. And so I grew up with a great grandma who had Alzheimer's, my another grandma who had dementia. Like these things are scary in the background of saying, oh, this is a genetic thing, right? I'm prone towards this. That's actually not true. Between different studies that you look at, between 50 and 70% of all dementias and most Alzheimer's cases can be prevented. And again, arguably the number one risk factor for that is sleep and rest.
Wow.
And your ability to handle, again, you might have a heightened stress tolerance, but that stress is still affecting you on a metabolic standpoint. And aging, essentially boiling it down, is an increased metabolic demand over time.
Yes. And I'm feeling so, because my answer is, I need some rest. I'm feeling a little tired. Let's brew another cup of coffee. Okay, we got it together. Okay, so you guys, listen up right now. I want you all to hear like the future with Dr. Joe in terms of Christy-Faith is he's already scheduled to teach a masterclass in Thrive Homeschool Community. And that there were so many topics that you are amazing at. Just you are such a wealth of information, and it's just absolutely incredible. It was hard for me to narrow down, but in Thrive, you're going to be doing an entire masterclass on self-esteem because we all want that for our kids. And what is it? How do we actually build that? And like the brain science behind it. And I love how you can blend. You're so good at this, Dr. Joe. You're good at blending like the science with the reality of life and the practical aspects of that. And I'm just so thankful that we got you to teach a masterclass in Thrive.
Well, I blame that on my parents. That's all their fault. So,
Well, and also I want to ask you too, you have written a children's book. I loved it. I love your children's book. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Would you just in 10 seconds, 20 seconds before I say the next thing that you do, would you just share what your children's book is about?
Yeah, it's the title is The Stinks, and it's about getting outside and getting the stink off. It's something that my grandpa would always say to his 14 kids. My mom would say to her 9 kids that whenever there was a struggle emotionally, it was go outside and get the stinks off. And so it's kind of written to that topic and the there's neurology behind why you need to go outside and get the stinks off. But I had a fun time doing it. The illustrator was actually my cousin's daughter. And so I was able to, it's all family related. So it's a very personal project to me on that.
Okay, great. And we will put a link in the show notes directly to that particular book. And you work with patients. You are a practicing doctor. Can you share what type of patients you work with, kids and adults, and what exactly you do? Because I asked you in the conference too, like, do you work over Zoom? Like, could you help the mamas in our community? So would you share a little bit about how you help families?
Yeah. So currently our main focus, so I have fellowship training in both concussion rehab and in neurodevelopmental disorders. And so we work both with adults from some of the cognitive side of things, some of the rehab side that's necessary. We work oftentimes with kids. Currently, most of that is in person. We are in the process of building out a virtual platform for that, to work both on kind of sensory integration, visual training, things like that, and tying a lot of cognitive systems into those sensory networks. And so we, like I said, we're in Iowa. We work primarily with in person. We do some telehealth, at least to help give guidance. And there are some other providers that are similar to what I do, have similar training. And so we like to connect with people locally as much as possible. So we can be a resource that way. And then, once we get something built out virtually, we work with, anything from learning disorders to cognitive development to actually kind of a niche that we're really forming unintentionally is more like behavioral, which is especially in the Christian realm or just in general, like behavioral oftentimes is misunderstood and is either chalked up to I'm not a good enough parent or my child is disobedient and rebellious. And so looking at the neurology behind that, and a lot of that is very personal again, because we had some struggles with a daughter of ours that turned out to be neurological dysregulation that was leading to emotional dysregulation. And so that's a lot of what we do, is trying to help. Ultimately, really, everything that we do comes from trying to find answers for ourselves personally. I was coaching high school football. That's why I got into concussion rehab. We had some personal issues in our family with development, and so that's why I did the developmental disorders. And so God has kind of used that to then be able to say, all right, how can you provide that for others? And then how can you provide that beyond just your local community, but how can you expand that even across the world? So that's really kind of where we come from with that.
Yes. And I love that. And I remember at the conference, I was sharing with you about my nephew who has pandas and how we were just relating on that, where any mom listening right now, if your child is currently experiencing concerning behaviors, please look at what could be happening in the brain before you label a child, and maybe that child will start to feel shame. I know that was one huge thing in terms of my nephew when he got pandas very young, and they found a great pediatrician in Boulder who specialized in pandas, and the pediatrician was wonderful. And he's like, my biggest priority is to make sure that he doesn't live a life of shame, because they have behaviors that they can't control. And it wasn't like, your son's a sinner or your son's demon possessed or you're this or that and the other. And so anyway, that was just really great. And I loved connecting with you and your wife, Angie, on that particular thing. And actually, Joe, this weekend, I'm filming an episode. I'm in the middle of a series right now that's coming out. It's a 6-part series where I'm just sharing a little bit about my life and being a little bit more vulnerable. Mainly, anyway, I won't go into why. The why is in episode 91, but one of the episodes is on why we left authoritarian parenting. And I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go there with corporal punishment and my beliefs on that and where we started and where we are now. And so I think that there's a lot of growth that needs to happen within myself. I'm healing. We are currently healing and will be for a long time. So don't think this comes from a place of pride at all. But I think there's been a lot of confusion, particularly in the Christian culture regarding that.
Just to put a plug in for the masterclass, even that's part of, we'll actually cover some of the neurology behind that. When we look at the neurology of self-esteem and identity formation and again, looking at how the brain is behind that, even talking about where does corporal punishment fit? Does it authoritarian parenting, things like that. So we'll actually cover the neurology behind some of that.
Oh, awesome. Great. Yeah. And if you're curious, okay, what's the difference between a masterclass and a podcast episode? Well, the difference between a podcast and a masterclass, it's just a masterclass goes way deeper, very pointed problem solving. The Women in Thrive Homeschool community, that is a paid community. If you want to hear more about Thrive Homeschool community, please, it's not open all of the time. So if you're interested in being in Thrive Homeschool community, which if you are a homeschool mom, you should be, because this is the place where we try to be the best homeschooling moms that we can be, the best educators that we can be. We are a growth mindset girly place. And so if Thrive is closed right now, just please get on the wait list and you'll be notified. And the waitlisters always get 24 hours early or 48 hours early. It depends on when. You guys basically get a guaranteed spot when we do reopen. And I'm so thankful, Dr. Joe, that you came on the show today to help us. I can't wait for that masterclass in Thrive Homeschool Community. Is there anything that you want to leave us with that maybe you wanted to say and forgot to, or a resource that we need to make sure that's in the show notes?
If I can just leave with kind of just a personal encouragement or a personal exhortation, is I'm a living example of homeschooling. Like, I truly, my parents sacrificed for me to be who I am, where I am, and oftentimes homeschooling parents, there's a lot of struggle of saying, is it worth it, and what's the end product going to look like, right? Because and I say that with parenting, you don't even know as a parent what if you're doing things right until it's too late to do anything about it, right? The product's already done before you actually know if you're doing it right. And so if I can just be an encouragement to homeschooling parents out there, that not to toot my horn, but like, I am a product of what you are building. And so don't get discouraged that what's the future going to look like. Keep pouring in, and like we talked about, the principles that are found in Scripture are being confirmed in science. And so if you continue to go back to what does Scripture say about something, that's honestly the best filter of what I should do. And so if you can align yourself by those principles, the end product, while not guaranteed, is worth the sacrifice and is worth the building.
Oh man. So yeah, we're going to end on me crying. Thank you. But no, that is really encouraging. And that is so true that we don't know the end result. It's like, we're just figuring this out along the way. And I'm sure you would be the first to say, I'm sure your parents are great, but they weren't perfect. Right? Yeah. So, and I think we put that pressure on ourselves just because we're involved in every aspect of our kids' lives. So mamas, hang in there. I hope this podcast today encouraged you incredibly. That's the whole point. That is our why. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I love, it's fun.
All right. We'll see you next time.
You have my heart.